right, welcome to episode 4 of the Mind Soul Connection podcast with Peter Marinelli and Ben Brathman, hosted by myself, Jaime Blaustein, CEO of the Sylvia Brathman Mental Health Center, and brought to you by Sylvia Brathman. Welcome, guys. How are you today?
Morning.
Doing well. Thanks for having us again. It's great.
Awesome. So it's turning the corner into 2023.
Okay.
I wanted to spice it up a little bit. And, we've been talking about some of these like higher level concepts, trauma and, stigmas. I want to get a little more specific. And what came to mind was, I've heard this phrase, finance and romance. Finance and romance. That
Right.
These typically are the things that there's the most fear around. The average person, I would say, if you were to say list your fears, they touch one of those two areas, at least number one, and number two is probably the other. So I want to focus on healthy romance in this episode. We could probably do a whole series on this topic, so we'll touch it to the extent that we can today. And then the next week, I want to focus more on career and finance. So when I say healthy romance, I'm talking dating and relationships, right? Whether you're in a marriage, whether you're actively dating, but really in the context of addiction and mental health recovery, right? So somebody in early recovery, what does that look like? And what are the considerations that we need to take into account? And then how does that evolve over time in your experience? So, right off the bat, somebody who's like early on, whether it's depression or heroin addiction, and they're getting better and they're engaged in this self-discovery process. Maybe they're in treatment, maybe they're not. When do you think dating is fair game?
So, want to take a stab at it here. Again, it's one of those gray areas where, you move the needle around. So I'm going to answer it this way. I think that a person has to have a relationship with themselves first on some level, especially when we're talking about the disease of addiction and mental illness, depression, anxiety. I mean, they really can't offer very much to someone else before they take care of themselves. And there's two ideas going on at once when it comes to relationships of any kind. And those ideas, those concepts are dishonesty and intimacy. And if you take the alcoholic and addict, the behavior is dishonest, right? Honesty or dishonesty is not a feeling; it's a behavior. And so, if a person can get honest with themselves, and they truly, to my own self be true, that part, when that's cleaned up and they feel pretty good about that, I think a relationship of any kind is on the table. Second half of that, of course, is intimacy, and intimacy comes in several different forms. It could be physical intimacy, emotional, mental, spiritual. Your relationship with God, your relationship with your family, all levels of intimacy. And if a person gets comfortable around that concept, because it's extremely difficult to bare your soul to someone else, you get vulnerable. If it's done too soon, the dishonesty that lingered can kick back in, and then the ego presents itself, and then it's just a mess. And most of the time, when these things go down, the person doesn't know anything about intimacy. They don't know how to share. They don't know, So early on, when somebody is stable on their meds, when somebody is early recovery from booze and drugs, I don't think that a relationship is a wise move. But then after that, and I don't know the time period, there's a general consensus that, no relationships in the first year, they just kind of throw that out there. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't, typically, just say, yeah, that's it. It's cut dry. But I think that if you look at it from the perspective of can you be dishonest and intimate at the same time? And the answer to that is no, you can't. You can't have a healthy relationship.
Yeah. Two reactions. One is I heard early on, what is intimacy? It's into me you see, right? So the concept of transparency, being honest. Peter, I saw you posted a meme the other day. Do you know what I'm talking about? It wasn't really a meme. It was more of just a post. You were like hanging with a cigar, looking like the Godfather you are, kind of peering. And it was like when your sponsee tells you he's dating in the first year. What's your take on that?
I can only go by my own experience and what I've seen and listened to over many years. And if you look at an alcoholic, when they get sober, what you have left over is a codependent. And there's something that's going on inside that person, this gaping hole, if you will, looking for anything or anyone to fill that up, looking to get comfort out of someone else, a pleasure out of someone else, make me feel good by someone else. And it's completely unfair. I don't know how to have a relationship with me. I don't even know what my likes and dislikes are yet. But someone, he or her, gives me some attention, and suddenly I melt like ice on fire. And it becomes, I've watched this over and over again, it becomes all about that person. Now, I don't know when you're supposed to start a relationship, when you're not supposed to be in a relationship. I just, again, can tell you by my experience, when you get two folks who are just starting out on a journey of recovery or healing, they're not capable at that point. I don't mean to sound condescending, but not capable of engaging with someone else at an intimate level. The picker is broken. That happened to me early on. We don't know how to pick a person and how to share with them and to be honest and to be practice fidelity is just not there. When someone first gets clean and sober, for example, because they're not using drugs or alcohol, albeit the symptoms been removed, we still have someone who has alcoholism and they come into recovery. And I like to use the phrase, they still wearing the street on them. So the values are from using. And how could I possibly have a relationship where in a healthy relationship, it's a give and take. It's pitching and catching. It's being there for someone even to the point where it hurts. And then them being there for you. It's not about ego, selfishness, self-centered, self-seeking. It's about being a part of this bond. When you're new on this journey, we don't have the tools for that yet. Now, we can talk a lot about ways to have a relationship. Now, there's some values, the obvious values you can say I need to bring into relationship: honesty, fidelity, compassion, understanding, integrity, things like that. But there's no book that I've ever read said this is how to have a successful relationship, because what works for you may not work for me. No?
Yeah.
I have found that two things. Am I okay enough with me to let someone be who they are, without trying to control them, without trying to direct them? Just let them be who they are. I can try to figure out ways to do this, yeah? The problem is this: I'm relying upon me to implement these things in a relationship. I'm relying upon me to be a certain way, and that's what we call self-reliance. That never works. But over and over and over again, I have found when someone gets right spiritually, it's a game changer. There's enough in them to say, this is unacceptable. I like and dislike this. There's enough courage in them to be transparent with someone else as well. For me, everything, and I speak for myself, everything trickles back to, where am I spiritually? How I work depends on how I am spiritually. My personal relationship depends upon where I am spiritually. How I dress depends upon where I'm spiritually. Everything. If not, my mind takes over. I see through the mind. I hear through the mind. I speak through the mind. I beat through the mind. It's a broken filter. It doesn't work. So how could I possibly have a relationship with anyone else?
Yeah.
It's very, very challenging. And the last thing, I've seen lots of folks get into relationships way too early. One relapses, and the other one sits on the sideline and watches the damage. Or sometimes they both wind up in detox. There's a young fella I know who hasn't dated for a while. He's very new in recovery. And he had called me and he says, I'm going out with this young lady. I said, I don't think you're ready yet. Give it some time. You're just starting out. He just got out of the nest, if you will. Like most alcoholics, they don't listen. And he went on one date. And I got a phone call from him, and he was upside down over one date.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, maybe we learned our lesson. So I says he needs to go back to his 12-step meeting and get with someone they call a sponsor and get busy with the 12 steps and develop a relationship with God. And once he does that, he'll find a relationship with himself. And maybe at that point. One last thing. Where does it say anywhere that we're supposed to be in a relationship? See, we're almost programmed. I'm a certain age, I should be like, well, it's nice to be in a relationship, a healthy relationship, and share your life with someone. But where does it say that? Perhaps God says, no relationship for you. I have other work for you to do. I don't need you to be distracted right now. So I need to be open to things like that. And if I'm not spiritually fit, I'm not. I want to do what I want, when I want, how much I want, as often as I want. That doesn't work. I wind up in divorce court.
Yeah, you guys both said a lot of great stuff here. So, firstly, this concept of the spiritual position that I'm in trickles down to every other area. For so many years, I viewed the recovery, mental wellness, I'm going to call it an account because I'm a banker, on the same sort of plane as the social account, as the dating account, as the family account, as the money account. And I was like, okay, I need to just fill each of these accounts. And at some point it shifted early on when I finally, surrendered to, okay, no, the way it actually works is that spiritual account is actually a tier above all the other accounts, which are on the same plane. And I keep making deposits in that spiritual account and it starts to trickle down to those others versus me going, doesn't mean that I don't take action in those other accounts. I do, but I'm not as outcome based. I'm not tied to the outcome. I just keep, as you say, chop wood, carry water, keep doing it, stay in the trenches, do your thing. It will take care of itself. I've had a couple great mentors, and the second one was a woman, and we had this great relationship where she lived in Maine. I had no clue what she looked like, didn't know how to use Zoom. The whole relationship was over the phone. And she would always say, and it was great to get the female perspective. And she would always say, when the right guy shows up, the right girl will show up. Right. So I just need to keep working on me. And then the first mentor, kind of going hand in hand with what you said, Peter, his approach wasn't, hey, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to sort of let you crash and burn, Ian. Not, of course, if it's imminent danger, I think he had intervened, but more like, hey, you might need to feel some sort of pain and discomfort to sort of get molded by God, So he let me get my reps in and learn and be, all up in my head. I think that first date that I went on too, 3 months sober in New York City, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't kiss her. And, just spinning. And I kind of needed that to sort of flush that out. So
I've had professionally and in my private life, so many men come up to me and say, I can't take it anymore. I keep meeting crazy women. And they go on and on and on. And I'll say, well, let's think about that for a minute. Let's say every one of these women that you meet are crazy. Lots of issues. I said, what's the common thread in all of that? You keep picking them.
Yeah.
That is the problem.
Yeah.
Maybe you need to stay away for a while.
Yeah.
The other thing you talked about, I forget how you said not everyone need, like, a relationship isn't like a requisite thing, right? And over time, this concept of like, what does a healthy relationship look like? Obviously, society puts this out there that you're supposed to date. You find someone, you settle down, and like that's it. And what I've learned over time is like, not everybody is bound to social norms, right? It looks different for different people, and you just got to kind of like stay connected with all the different practices, your overall wellness package, and it might look different for certain people. I have a cousin that didn't get married till he was 42, and people were like hounding him forever, but he was enjoying his life and his motives were properly placed. And I think a lot of people rush into something because they're so concerned with optics and what people think and fear of rejection and fear of abandonment, and they jump into it. And I'm really glad that I'm not in that position. I'm comfortable alone. I'm okay with that. And so when I do pick somebody, it's going to be because my motives are in the right place.
The thing that always attracted me to folks who I viewed as happy in a relationship was folks who maintained their independence, but yet were a team. There was no domineering person. We're brought up with a man as the head of the house, and that works for some people. But there was no militant leader in the house. It wasn't, I said this, so everyone has to follow. It just seemed easy and fun. And I watched so many folks, even in recovery, just excited to be together. And giving their wife would have her own independence, and the husband would have his own independence, and they had their own little things that they like to do alone, and it worked well, and that always attracted to me. I'm brought up different, like a lot of us, where the dad was the king of the castle, and everything he said went, and it wasn't always good. The ship was headed to Titanic, and you couldn't tell it, towards the iceberg, and we couldn't tell him that, and it became very domineering, and there was no room for growth. Everything had to go through him, and and that worked for some folks. But growing up, that wasn't attractive to me anymore.
Mm. I've talked to both of you about this attachment theory, and I don't know if you've like studied this in a kind of academic way. I read the book Attached. I don't know if you guys have read that, but it's about attachment theory. It's by, I think, the original sort of founders of attachment theory. The concept being, in relationships, there are three main attachment styles. There's a fourth sort of sub style. And if you think of it like a spectrum, you've got anxious on one hand. That's, I'm worried they're going to leave me. I constantly need the validation to know that like I'm in this person is interested in me. There's secure, which is sort of in the middle of the spectrum. And then there's avoidant, which is fear of loss of independence. I'm going to keep you at an arm's length. Obviously, difficulties with intimacy. Then there's, again, this fourth subdivision is disorganized, which basically means you're anxious and you're avoidant. And I've been all three of them, to be honest, all four. I'd like to think I'm secure now, but there were times, especially back in the day, I used to be very anxious. And then in the last probably 4 or 5 years, I found I've shifted more to the avoidant side of the spectrum, hopefully still in secure territory, but definitely leaning more avoidant. There's obviously, we could have probably a whole show on just attachment theory. I'm curious to know like what your take on that is and how it sort of can be applied to mental wellness.
Well, the first thing is that before it even gets to some type of attachment, people bring into relationships their stuff, and somebody with an anxiety disorder, if they're not right, the relationship is going to cause more anxiety. If they're not right with themselves, they could cause more depression. And I think that people jump into relationships because of what we said earlier, which is a lot of social norms. and I have to be in a relationship. I have to be dating, someone. I have to make my family happy. They have these unspoken rules, that never work. I think the attachment, these theories are valid. I think they're pretty simplistic too. That just like what you described, 4 or 5 years ago, you were much more immature. So of course you're going to be all over the place, and then as over time, and you've talked about this a lot, you're less of those things. And again, it goes back to what we talked about earlier, the being honest with yourself and being intimate with yourself and being right with yourself. And so I like these ideas. I like the attachment theories. It gives somebody a roadmap, simplistically, where they can look at it and say, yeah, you know what, that's not only is that me, but I'm likely to be disorganized as this relationship goes. I'm likely to be more anxious. A relationship initially is not going to cause you less anxiety. It's going to cause more anxiety. And if you're not ready, like in your own, that high level of anxiety, like you just said, like, I didn't kiss her. I didn't you literally drive yourself crazy. And if you're identifying as a alcoholic or drug addict, guess what? That's going to lead to a major relapse.
Yeah, it's funny. You said a relation. I agree. Like, my experience is aligned with the fact that a relationship causes more anxiety, not less. But I actually, just to be a little vulnerable, I see a therapist. I hadn't seen a therapist in a while. I see one now specifically for that area of my life. She's like an intimacy and relationship, just because I want to grow more in this area and I want to flush some things out. And she said something that, even though I'm 9 years in, my, naturally wired to be an addict brain was like shocked by it. She was like, when you're in a relationship, like, you want to be relaxed, like you want to feel serenity and ease. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not used to that. I like the dopamine hit, you know what I mean? And if I don't have the dopamine hit, I'm not like excited. I don't know. It sort of reframed it for me, and now, I sort of thought if you have that peace and you could be relaxed and not anxious, then it takes something away from the interest. And I think they're not necessarily mutually exclusive.
Right.
For some folks at the beginning, that date, that relationship is a drink or a drug. And that's what they get attached to as well. When you refer to attachments, I was thinking something loosely parallels what you're talking about. So you have John and Mary, and they go on their first date, and they're sitting at a table in a restaurant. And it looks like there's two people at that table. And John thinks Mary's there alone, and Mary thinks John's there all alone. In reality, there's about 40 people sitting at that table. See, because she has all her exes sitting at that table and formed some ideas about men, we'll say. Hurts, hopes that were shattered. Then she has mom and dad right there. And she has her grandparents there. And she has her siblings there. And all those voices are going out at the same time. You should and you shouldn't. You should and you shouldn't. You better not. And he's got the same crew. So at that restaurant table, it's very, very crowded at this intimate table. And then when they eventually try to consummate the relationship and they think they're the only two in the bedroom, the whole family's there as well. Not literally, but up in the head. If it was literally, we have another podcast to do. But up in the head, there's all these voices. Now, all those voices create your current reality. So although I think I like this person, I'm making sure mom and dad approves also. And my brothers, what are they going to think? And my sisters, what are they going to think? And my grandparents, what are they going to think? And there's all this noise going on. How could I possibly claim I'm in an intimate relationship when I'm still dependent on point of views of others? And those are huge attachments that need to be unattached before I'm ready to go out there and start to mingle with other folks. It even happens in guys hanging out, women hanging out. A lot of that is dictated by what I've been programmed to believe in. I don't even know what I like or dislike yet. And I have about 30 or 40 or 60 days clean and sober. I'm not ready to make that leap.
Yeah. It's a great visual. I love that. I also love
Crowded
that
table.
whenever you
Crowded table.
whenever you give when we were working together personally in the
movie.
beginning, you you said John and Mary, right? I think you were saying to me like you had Donna, like Mary, and like Sue Ann or something. And I was like, Peter, I'm not dating 65-year-old women.
Sue Ann.
I don't think there's anyone below the age of 60 named I know a Mary, but a Donna, whatever. Just I assume Don. We're going to hear a lot about Mary and John and Donna over the course of the next few weeks.
No question about it. They need help.
So I have a question. Is especially during this whole like Me Too movement, like you've heard people talk about sex addiction. My initial thought was cop out, but it's also not that cookie cutter, right? Like I can see sex and love is powerful, right? Like
Very
is it a
powerful.
thing? Is that a thing? Sex addiction?
Absolutely.
Pornography is $1 billion industry.
It is a thing.
Right, but
It is a thing.
is it on the same plane as drug addiction or alcoholism?
Yes.
Yes.
It and I'll even be controversial. It could be worse. It could be worse. It is debilitating. It's led people to drugs and alcohol. It's led people to suicide, homicide. It is out there, and you can't imagine the people that that it impacts. Who's a great speaker about this is Terry Crews, the actor. The big black guy from what was that show? I don't know. He's on a TV show. He talks about it, and I mean, if you look at him, you would think like, no, he's the guy. He's the man. And yet he talks about his sex addiction. Really, really impactful because of who he is and what he looks like, and he breaks those norms, and it can impact anybody, just like addiction. Park bench to park place. It's nasty. And here's the thing about it: when you get on that that merry-go-round, or actually, you know what? It's not a merry-go-round. It's kind of like the water that's going around the drain. When you're in it like that, you're completely helpless and completely overwhelmed, and you feel like you're going down the drain. There's nothing you can do about it. There's nobody that can help you, and it's terrifying. So yeah, it is. It's on the same level. And you're right, Peter. Pornography is $1 billion industry. It's very difficult.
Lots of men come up to me and say, "Can I talk to you about something?" I almost know by the look where we're going with it. It's happened to me so many times, and they'll introduce it by saying something like, "I'm struggling. I know where we're going," and they're perhaps in a committed relationship or married, and they've been sober a while. They're healing, and something's happened. It's always sex. They're acting out not only with pornography, they're going to places for instant gratification. The wife has found out, she's about to leave him. The kids are upside down. See, one person who does that impacts a lot of people. It's not like just me, I'm hurt, or I hurt my significant other, my lover, but there's other people involved. And it's like watching someone smoking crack, expecting everyone to give an applause. It's going to be okay. It's not okay.
Yeah. I want to kind of turn to like a more positive perspective on this than smoking crack. Just to sort of like wrap this up, right? Yeah. I guess my question is like, do you think that overcoming addiction and mental illness can actually be a tailwind or an enhancement, I should say, in relationships, like in a healthy relationship? Meaning not that you're in early days and you're struggling, but if you are able to recover, can it be helpful? I'm just going to tell you that my experience is that really good recovery from whatever it is an enhancer in different areas of my life. And we're going to talk about career and job and relationships, but we now operate on a different plane. We bring a set of principles that I think makes it so that we actually took one step back to take 5 forward. And we're better than we would have been had we never struggled with that. But I want to hear your take on that.
Absolutely. If you're in love, and you've gained your independence, you're God-centered, which means you're doing lots of things together, visiting your local religious community together, helping other people together, letting someone kind of go off and do their thing. My wife is a singer-songwriter. She works in the business, and I'll come home and she'll be in one of the rooms singing. And sometimes I love to listen to her sing, and sometimes she's writing, and I leave her while she's writing music, and that's okay to do. It's fun. You really get to take a good chunk out of life and share it together. Conversely, when you're new, it's a struggle. It's painful. It's anxiety provoking. It's like, oh my God, just stalking. People in early recovery loving stalking is synonymous.
It's the same thing, right?
It's the same thing. Yeah.
I wanted to have a little bit of a different perspective on this. Yes, the short answer is if you're truly in recovery, regardless of what you're in recovery for, yes, it can be an enhancement. It can be very, very beneficial. But there's a flip side to it, and that is that if you're in a relationship with someone, they might not understand your position, your situation, and that you have to make sure that that's sort of spelled out, because if it's not, that's going to lead to some difficulties, lack of intimacy, or the recovering person not being open and honest. So you want to be careful about that. A person that you described, that means that that they are okay with themselves. It means that they've forgiven themselves on some level. They know what they want. They know their boundaries. They know the line. That's great, but that's not a guarantee that the person that they are with or want to be with is going to be accepting of all that. And that it's just something that somebody in recovery from mental illness and drugs and alcohol needs to be mindful of.
Yeah, early on, I think I shared this in a previous episode, I was so scared about, this is at 25 years old in New York City, going on dates with, earth people, as we call them, so scared about what the reaction was going to be. As I got more comfortable and I started to own it, I found that, in combination with that, A, being more comfortable in my own skin, B, being able to articulate more confidently, and C, just by virtue of, I think, getting out of the early 20s and people, normal people starting to mature a little bit in terms of, getting out of the party mentality, it actually became a massive tailwind. It was very attractive to a lot of people. I'd say in recent years on dates, I would say 50% of people completely indifferent that I don't drink. I would say 40% of people view it as a positive, because many people have had relationships where alcohol or drugs or something else has gotten in the way of it, and they find it refreshing, especially when they realize I'm not a square. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then probably 10% have an issue with it. And that's a good screening process, because if there's an issue up front, it's just not going to work.
I'll tell you a little secret. It's a tell when you're going to have a problem relationship. So if you go to dinner, a nice romantic place, and you sit down, and the waiter comes over and says, "Well, what will you have to drink?" And the young lady orders a martini or whatever she does, and then you order iced tea, and the waiter goes away, and the young lady says, "You didn't order a drink," and you're like, "Yeah, that's right," and then maybe even go into it a little bit as to why. You have that kind of conversation, and you're cool with it, and then she keeps asking you questions, like, well, what's the problem or why not or whatever. That is a massive red flag. It tells me that individual actually may have a problem with alcohol. It also tells me that there's boundary issues already. It also tells me that perhaps they're not going to be respectful of what I need and what I want. And I know that I'm being a little critical right now, and it's not every single time, but I have found in my personal experience, when that happens, it's an indication of other things going on with that individual.
Yeah. It's funny. I've had different perspectives on that. I've had a lot of questions and they're genuinely interested and curious. Yeah. I've had it where it is critical. I usually have my little elevator pitch. You don't want to overshare. The tendency early on is like, this is my story.
Right.
And you don't want to do that. And, I make a joke out of it and I say, club soda, cranberry. Oh, why don't you drink? Well, I say, I have a Diet Coke if I'm feeling wild. Yeah. And, you get a little laugh and, you keep it moving.
Absolutely. So. No, but I'm just saying that within the relationship, it definitely is an indicator.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. So this has been a great conversation. And I'm sure we'll probably do a part 2 on this because there's just so much to unpack. For now, any concluding thoughts before we wrap it up?
Don't date and don't go where you're not supposed to go. That's to sum it up.
Yeah. All right. So thank you guys so much. I guess I'm encouraged to know, and it's based on my own experience, Peter and Ben, you guys both touched on it, that there is a silver lining with this whole romance thing, that if we do the right thing and we really chip away at all the different elements of our wellness package, whether that's 12-step meetings or, therapy, whatever it may be, we can actually come out ahead, and it can be impactful in a positive way in dating and relationships. So any questions from the audience, please feel free to send them, leave your comments on the YouTube, Facebook, whatever platform you might be viewing this on, and we'll be sure to address questions in future episodes. And yeah, we are looking forward to the next episode where we'll get to talk a little bit more about another fear, which is finance and career. So thank you guys for joining. Appreciate it.